The Galactic Council had always treated Earth as a dangerous place, unfit for life. For hundreds of years, the planet was labeled a Deathworld, a term used to describe planets that were too hostile for anyone to survive. The reasons were clear. Earth was home to ferocious creatures, unpredictable weather, and environments that could kill even the strongest beings. It was a world that seemed almost alive in its hostility, actively rejecting any attempt at colonization. Ships avoided it, settlers feared it, and corporations saw no value in risking their resources on such a deadly rock. But times change, and so did Earth. Or at least, that's what the data suggested. Over the past few decades, reports from automated drones and satellites painted a different picture. The number of apex predators had dropped significantly. Storms, once devastating, now followed predictable patterns. Even the toxic regions, once barren wastelands, showed signs of recovery. Scientists on the Galactic Council began to wonder if Earth's classification needed updating. Was it still a death world, or had it become something else entirely? Daniel Carter sat in his small office aboard the Council's orbital station, staring at the glowing screen in front of him. He was a junior analyst, young and eager to prove himself. His job was to sift through reams of data collected from Earth and present findings to the senior members of the Council. For weeks he had been studying the latest scans, cross-referencing them with historical records. What he found excited him. Earth wasn't the same planet it had been centuries ago. It was quieter, calmer, and far more stable than anyone expected. Laura, Bennett, Daniel's colleague and occasional rival, leaned against the doorway of his office. She was older, more experienced, and known for her cautious approach to decision-making. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was skeptical. "You're really going to push for this, aren't you?" she asked, her tone tinged with disapproval. "Why not?" Daniel replied without looking up. "The numbers don't lie. Earth is safer now. We've seen the scans. The wildlife isn't nearly as aggressive and the atmosphere is breathable. In most areas. If we don't act, someone else will." Laura sighed and stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "It's not just about the numbers, Daniel. Earth has a history of being unpredictable. Just because things look calm doesn't mean they are. You think we understand everything about that planet? We don't. No one does." Daniel finally turned to face her, his eyes bright with determination. "That's why we need to try. Humanity deserves a second chance. This is our home, Laura. If we can make it work here, think of what it means for the future." Laura shook her head but didn't argue further. She knew Daniel well enough to recognize when he was set on something. Once he got an idea into his head, there was no stopping him. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were rushing into something dangerous. Earth had a way of surprising people, often in unpleasant ways. A few days later, the Council convened to discuss the matter. Representatives from various factions filled the chamber, their holographic forms flickering slightly as they debated the issue. Some argued that Earth should remain untouched, a relic of humanity's past best left alone. Others saw potential, a chance to expand their influence, exploit untapped resources, or even establish new colonies. Daniel stood at the center of it all, presenting his case with confidence. "The evidence is clear," he said, gesturing to the projections hovering above the table. Images of lush forests, clean rivers, and peaceful landscapes rotated slowly. Earth is no longer the death trap it once was. With proper planning and regulation, we can reintroduce human civilization to its birthplace. This isn't just a new opportunity, it's our responsibility. Laura watched silently from her seat, her fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. She wanted to speak up, to voice her concerns, but she knew it wouldn't do much good. The Council was already leaning toward approval. The promise of reclaiming Earth was too tempting for most of them to resist. In the end, the vote passed. Earth's classification was officially downgraded from Deathworld to conditionally habitable. News of the decision spread quickly across the galaxy, sparking a wave of excitement. Corporations scrambled to secure mining rights. Tourist agencies began advertising trips to see Earth's ancient ruins. Settlers prepared for the journey, dreaming of a fresh start on their ancestral home. As the first ships departed for Earth, Daniel felt a surge of pride. He had done it. Against all odds, he had convinced the Council to take a chance on their planet. But Laura couldn't share his enthusiasm. She stayed late in her office that night, staring at the stars outside her window. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, though she couldn't put her finger on it. Earth had been quiet for too long, almost as if it were waiting. Waiting for what? She didn't know. But she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was walking into a trap, one they might not escape from. Little did anyone realize Earth wasn't done with them yet. The first group of settlers landed on Earth 6 months after the Council's decision. Led by Richard Hayes, a pragmatic man with years of experience managing colonies on other planets, the team consisted of engineers, scientists, and laborers, eager to start anew. Their destination was what used to be New York City, now a mix of crumbling skyscrapers and overgrown vegetation. The plan was simple: establish a base camp, assess the environment, and begin laying the groundwork for future expansion. At first, everything seemed promising. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the scent of greenery reclaiming the concrete jungle. Birds chirped in the distance, and small animals darted between the ruins. Richard and his team set up prefabricated shelters near the edge of Central Park, where the soil appeared rich and fertile. They tested the water from nearby streams and found it clean enough to drink after minimal filtration. For the first time in centuries, Earth felt welcoming, but cracks began to show almost immediately. The crops they planted refused to grow beyond seedlings, no matter how much care they gave them. Seeds sprouted, only to wither within days. The settlers tried different types: wheat, corn, potatoes, but nothing worked. "It's like the soil rejects us," muttered one of the farmers, wiping sweat from his brow as he stared at yet another failed attempt. Then came the equipment malfunctions. Machines that had functioned perfectly during tests suddenly broke down without explanation. Power generators sputtered out, leaving the camp in darkness for hours at a time. Communication devices crackled with static, making contact with orbiting ships unreliable. The settlers were forced to rely on manual labor, hauling supplies by hand and building structures using rudimentary tools. Morale began to drop as frustration mounted. One night, strange noises echoed through the camp. At first, the settlers thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees or distant thunder rolling across the sky. But then they heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. Richard grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, scanning the darkness. His beam caught the glowing eyes of several wolves standing at the edge of the camp. They didn't attack or run away. Instead, they simply stared, their movements eerily synchronized. "Get back inside," Richard ordered, ushering his team into the safety of the shelters. The wolves remained there all night, watching silently until dawn. When the sun rose, they vanished into the forest, leaving behind no tracks or signs of their presence. Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, Laura Bennett monitored reports from various settlements springing up around the globe. She wasn't surprised to hear about the challenges facing Richard's team. Similar stories trickled in from other locations. In South America, a logging crew reported strange fungi growing in the trees they cut down. The fungi glowed faintly in the dark and emitted soft, whisper-like sounds when touched. In Africa, geothermal drilling operations triggered earthquakes unlike anything recorded before. And in Europe, settlers claimed to see shadowy figures moving through the forests at night, figures that disappeared whenever approached. Laura compiled the data into a report and brought it to Daniel Carter. He was busy preparing for another round of colonization efforts, his desk cluttered with maps and supply manifests. When she placed the file in front of him, he glanced at it briefly before pushing it aside. "These are just isolated incidents," he said dismissively. "Every new settlement faces challenges. We'll adapt." Laura frowned, her patience wearing thin. "Isolated? Daniel, this isn't normal. Equipment doesn't break for no reason. Crops don't fail unless something is wrong with the soil. And those wolves? Did you read the part about how they just stood there staring all night? That's not natural behavior." Daniel sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I get it, Laura. You're worried. But we can't let fear stop us. Humanity needs this. If we pull out now, we'll lose everything we've worked for. Laura opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. She could see the determination in his eyes, the same stubbornness that had driven him to push for Earth's reclassification in the first place. Arguing with him wouldn't change anything. Instead, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She reached out to Emily Dawson, a linguist specializing in deciphering ancient languages. Emily had spent years studying artifacts recovered from Earth's ruins, piecing together fragments of a long-lost civilization. Laura hoped she might shed some light on what was happening. Together, they pored over old texts and inscriptions, searching for clues. Meanwhile, the situation on Earth continued to deteriorate. More settlers arrived, unaware of the growing unease among the pioneers. Some dismissed the strange occurrences as mere superstition or bad luck. Others grew increasingly paranoid, convinced they were being watched. Tensions ran high as resources dwindled and tempers flared. One evening, Richard gathered his team around a flickering fire. The mood was somber, the weight of their struggles hanging heavy in the air. "We need to figure this out," he said, his voice firm but weary. "Whatever's going on here, it's not random. There's something we're missing." A young engineer named Sarah spoke up hesitantly. What if Earth doesn't want us here?" The words hung in the silence, met with uneasy glances. No one laughed or dismissed her suggestion. Deep down, they all felt it, that nagging sense of being unwelcome. Earth had been quiet for too long, almost as if it were biding its time. And now, slowly but surely, it was showing its true nature. As the flames danced in the darkness, none of them noticed the faint glow emanating from the ground beneath their feet. Nor did they hear the soft whispers carried by the wind, barely, audible but unmistakably present. Earth was awake and it was watching. The incidents on Earth grew worse with each passing day. Settlers in South America stumbled upon a hidden network of tunnels beneath the jungle floor. The tunnels were filled with bioluminescent fungi that pulsed with an eerie light, casting strange shadows on the walls. When touched, the fungi emitted soft whispers, sounds that resembled human speech but were impossible to understand. The settlers recorded the noises and sent the files back to the Galactic Council, hoping someone could decipher them. In Africa, engineers drilling for geothermal energy triggered a series of earthquakes unlike anything seen before. The ground split open, revealing veins of glowing crystal embedded deep within the earth. The crystals hummed with energy, emitting low-frequency vibrations that made people feel dizzy and disoriented. Workers reported seeing visions, flashes of ancient cities, towering spires, and figures moving silently through the streets. Some claimed the figures spoke to them, though no one could agree on what they said. In Europe, reports of shadowy figures became more frequent. Settlers described tall, humanoid shapes moving through the forests at night. The figures never came close enough to be seen clearly, but their presence was undeniable. One group of settlers set up cameras to capture footage, but when they reviewed the recordings, all they found was static. It was as if the figures existed outside the realm of normal perception. Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, Laura Bennett and Emily Dawson worked tirelessly to piece together the growing puzzle. Emily translated fragments of ancient texts recovered from Earth's ruins. The inscription spoke of a race called the Veilith, who once ruled the planet but chose to retreat underground rather than face extinction. According to the texts, the Veilith entered a state of suspended animation, leaving behind guardians to protect their world from intruders. Laura studied the data coming in from the settlements. She noticed patterns. Strange occurrences always happened near certain locations, places marked by unusual geological features or dense concentrations of the glowing fungi. "It's like they're waking up," she said one evening as she and Emily pored over maps and notes. "Whatever these guardians are, they're responding to our presence." Emily nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. If the Veilith are real, and if they're still alive down there, then we've made a huge mistake. We've disturbed something we don't understand. Their findings convinced the Council to send a research vessel back to Earth. The mission was led by Jack Monroe, a seasoned survivalist known for his ability to handle dangerous situations. Joining him was Emily, whose expertise in ancient languages would be crucial if they encountered any traces of the Veilith. Laura stayed behind, coordinating efforts from the orbital station and analyzing incoming data. When the team arrived on Earth, they linked up with Richard Hayes and his settlers. The camp was tense, the air thick with unease. Supplies were running low and morale was at an all-time low. Richard briefed Jack and Emily on the latest developments, showing them videos of the glowing fungi, the crystal veins, and the shadowy figures. "We need answers," he said, his voice heavy with desperation. "And we need them fast." The team set out the next morning, heading toward one of the locations marked on Laura's map. Their journey took them through dense forests, across barren wastelands, and into the heart of Earth's most treacherous regions. Along the way, they encountered phenomena that defied explanation. Rivers flowed uphill, looping back on themselves in impossible patterns. Mountains shifted positions overnight, forcing the team to constantly adjust their course. Entire ecosystems seemed designed to deter intruders, with plants that released paralyzing spores and animals that acted unnervingly intelligent. One night, as they camped near a cluster of glowing fungi, Jack noticed something odd. The fungi weren't just whispering, they were repeating a single phrase over and over again. He recorded the sound and played it back for Emily. After hours of analysis, she managed to isolate the words, "Leave now." "This isn't a coincidence," Emily said, her voice trembling. Were the fungi trying to warn them? Or were they part of the Guardians meant to protect the Veilith? As they pressed on, the team began experiencing strange occurrences of their own. Supplies disappeared without explanation, only to reappear days later in different locations. Communication devices failed sporadically, cutting them off from the orbital station. And every member of the team reported vivid dreams of being watched by unseen eyes. In the dreams, they heard whispers, not from the fungi, but from something deeper, older, and far more powerful. Jack kept the group moving, determined to reach their destination despite the growing sense of dread. When they finally arrived, they found themselves standing at the entrance to a massive underground cavern. The walls shimmered with veins of glowing crystal, and the air was thick with the same low-frequency hum that had disoriented the engineers in Africa. At the center of the cavern stood a structure, a towering obelisk covered in intricate carvings. Emily approached the obelisk cautiously, running her fingers over the symbols etched into its surface. "This is it," she whispered. "This is their language." As she began translating the inscriptions, the ground beneath them trembled. The crystals in the walls pulsed brighter, and the whispers grew louder, forming coherent words. "You have awakened us." Jack grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her back. "We need to go. Now." But it was too late. The shadows in the cavern began to shift, coalescing into shapes that towered over them. The Veilith had arrived. The shadows in the cavern moved like liquid, swirling and stretching until they formed towering figures. The Veilith were unlike anything the team had ever seen. Their forms shifted constantly, a mix of light and darkness that seemed to pulse with energy. They didn't have faces, but their presence was overwhelming, as if they could see into the deepest corners of the human soul. The air grew heavier, making it hard to breathe, and the whispers in the cavern turned into a deafening roar. Emily froze, her eyes wide with awe and terror. She clutched her notebook tightly, the translations she had worked on now feeling useless. Jack stepped forward, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side, but he stopped himself. These beings weren't like any enemy he had faced before. They radiated power, and fighting them would be pointless. One of the Veilith moved closer, its form stabilizing slightly. Its voice echoed in their minds, not through their ears, but directly in their thoughts. "Why have you come here?" it asked, each word resonating with authority. Jack swallowed hard and forced himself to speak. We didn't know this was your world. We thought Earth was abandoned. We meant no harm." The Veilith paused, as if considering his words. Then it spoke again. This planet is ours. We chose to retreat to preserve what remained. Your kind left long ago, and we hoped you would not return. But now you disturb our rest. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. We can leave. We'll go back to the stars and leave Earth as it is. Just tell us what you want. The Veilith turned its attention to her, its shifting form seeming to focus on her presence. You do not understand, it said. Your arrival has disrupted the balance we work to maintain. The soil rejects your crops. The machines you bring fail because they are incompatible with this world. Even the air you breathe changes when you linger too long. Laura's voice suddenly crackled over their communication devices, faint but clear. Jack, Emily, can you hear me? You need to get out of there. Now. She had been monitoring their progress from the orbital station and must have picked up on the strange energy readings emanating from the cavern. Jack glanced at Emily, then back at the Veilith. We'll leave, he said firmly. But give us time to gather our people. We won't cause any more trouble. The Veilith hesitated, its form flickering as if weighing their promise. Finally it spoke again. Very well, but know this. If you break your word, you will face consequences, far greater than you can imagine. With that, the cavern began to shake violently. The glowing crystals dimmed and the shadows retreated, dissolving into the walls. The Veilith vanished, leaving the team alone in the sudden silence. Back at the camp, Richard Hayes listened intently as Jack and Emily recounted their encounter. The settlers sat around a makeshift table, their faces pale and drawn. No one spoke for a long time, the weight of what they had learned sinking in. So, what do we do now? Sarah asked finally, breaking the silence. Do we just pack up and leave? Richard shook his head. It's not that simple. Even if we wanted to go, most of our ships are damaged or grounded. We're stuck here until repairs can be made. Jack nodded grimly. And while we're here, we need to follow their rules. No mining, no drilling, no messing with the environment. If we don't, they'll make sure we regret it. Emily added, they're not hostile unless provoked. I think they just want to be left alone, but we've already done too much damage. We need to figure out how to fix it, or at least stop making things worse. Over the next few days, the settlers worked together to dismantle parts of their camp. They removed equipment that might disrupt the natural balance and focused on survival, using only what the land provided. It wasn't easy. The soil still refused. To grow crops and hunting proved challenging as animals became increasingly elusive, but slowly they adapted, learning to live in harmony with the planet rather than trying to conquer it. Meanwhile, Laura coordinated with the Galactic Council, relaying everything Emily and Jack had discovered. The council was divided. Some argued that humanity should abandon Earth entirely, while others believed there was still hope for coexistence. Daniel Carter found himself torn between pride in his initial vision and guilt over the chaos it had caused. He knew the decision wouldn't be easy, but he also knew they couldn't ignore the warnings of the Veilith. A month later, a delegation arrived from the council, including Daniel and several senior members. They met with the settlers and listened to their stories. When they ventured into the cavern where the Veilith had appeared, they found it empty, the obelisk silent and cold, but the crystals still hummed faint. None of them doubted the truth of what the team had described. Daniel approached Emily privately one evening, his expression conflicted. I never meant for this to happen, he admitted quietly. I thought we were doing the right thing. Emily looked at him, her gaze steady. Maybe you did, but good intentions don't change the facts. Earth isn't ours anymore, it belongs to them. If we want to survive here, we have to respect that. Daniel nodded slowly. I'll make sure the council understands. Whatever happens next, we can't afford to repeat our mistakes. As the delegation prepared to leave, the settlers gathered to watch. There was a sense of uncertainty in the air, but also a glimmer of hope. Humanity had been given a second chance, not to reclaim Earth, but to learn how to exist alongside it. Unbeknownst to them, Deep beneath the surface, the Valith watched and waited. They had allowed humanity to stay, for now. But their patience was not infinite, and the fragile truce could shatter at any moment. The Galactic Council convened in an emergency session to decide Earth's fate. The chamber buzzed with tension as representatives argued over the best course of action. Some demanded an immediate withdrawal, claiming humanity had no right to stay on a planet that clearly belonged to another species. Others insisted they could find a way to coexist, pointing to the settlers' efforts to adapt and live within the Valith's rules. Daniel Carter stood at the center of it all, his face pale but resolute. "We made a mistake," he admitted, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "But pulling out now won't fix anything. We've already disturbed the balance. If we leave without finding a way to make amends, we risk angering the Valith further. And if they retaliate, it won't just be Earth that suffers. It could affect every human colony in the galaxy." Laura Bennett nodded in agreement. She had spent weeks analyzing data from the settlers and piecing together the Valith's behavior. "They're not unreasonable," she said. "They gave us a chance to leave peacefully, but they also let us stay under strict conditions. That means there's room for negotiation. If we show them we're willing to respect their world, maybe we can earn their trust." After hours of debate, the Council reached a decision. Humanity would remain on Earth, but only in limited numbers and under heavy restrictions. Settlements would be confined to specific zones approved by the Valith, and any activity that disrupted the environment, mining, drilling, or industrial development, was strictly forbidden. Regular inspections would ensure compliance, and anyone caught violating the terms would face severe consequences. When the news reached the settlers, reactions were mixed. Some felt relieved, grateful for the opportunity to stay. Others were frustrated, seeing the restrictions as a betrayal of their dreams of rebuilding civilization. But Richard Hayes reminded them of the stakes. "This isn't about what we want," he said during a camp meeting. "It's about survival. We're guests here whether we like it or not. If we don't play by their rules, we'll lose everything." Over time, life on Earth settled into a fragile routine. The settlers learned to live lightly, relying on sustainable practices and respecting the boundaries set by the Valith. They built small communities using natural materials, avoiding technology that might interfere with the planet's delicate systems. Hunting and gathering became their primary means of sustenance, and they grew adept at reading the signs of the land, learning which areas to avoid and which resources were safe to use. Emily Dawson stayed behind, determined to continue her work, deciphering the Valith's language. With Jack Monroe's help, she explored more of the underground caverns, documenting carvings and inscriptions that hinted at the Valith's history. Slowly, she began to understand their perspective. The Valith hadn't retreated underground out of fear or weakness. They had done so to protect Earth from themselves. Their advanced technology and immense power had nearly destroyed the planet, and they chose stasis as a way to preserve what little remained. "They see us as reckless," Emily explained to Jack one evening as they sat by a campfire. "And, honestly, they're not wrong. We came here thinking we could take what we wanted without considering the cost. But I think they also see potential in us, if we're willing to change." Jack stared into the flames, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think we can? Change, I mean. Humans aren't exactly known for restraint." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but we have to try. For Earth's sake, and for ours." Months passed, and the settlers began to notice subtle changes. The soil, once barren, started yielding small crops. Animals returned to areas they had avoided before, and the air seemed cleaner, fresher. It was as if Earth itself was responding to their efforts, rewarding their newfound respect. Even the glowing fungi whispered less frequently, their tones softer, almost welcoming. One night, the Valith appeared again. This time, they emerged not in anger but in curiosity. Their forms shimmered above the settlement, observing silently as the humans went about their daily lives. Emily approached them cautiously, holding up a tablet displaying her translations. "We're trying," she said aloud, knowing they could hear her thoughts. "We know we've made mistakes, but we're learning. Please, give us a chance." "Thou." Valith didn't respond immediately. Instead, they lingered, watching and listening. Finally, one of them spoke, its voice resonating in everyone's minds. "Your actions speak louder than your words. So far you have shown restraint. Continue this path and perhaps we can coexist." With that, they vanished, leaving the settlers stunned but hopeful. For the first time since their arrival, humanity felt a glimmer of acceptance. Earth was no longer just a place to conquer or exploit. It was a partner, a teacher, and a reminder of the importance of humility. As the years went by, Earth became both a sanctuary and a prison. Humanity learned to live within its limits, adapting to a world that refused to bend to their will. The settlers passed down stories of the Valith, teaching future generations to respect the planet and its true rulers. Earth remained unpredictable, its mysteries far from fully understood, but it offered a second chance, a chance to rebuild not just their homes, but their relationship with the natural world. Daniel Carter often thought about the choices he had made, the risks he had taken. Standing on the orbital station, looking down at Earth's blue-green surface, he couldn't help but wonder if they had truly escaped disaster, or merely postponed it. But for now, there was peace. Fragile, uncertain, but real. And somewhere, deep below, the Valith watched and waited, ensuring their world stayed exactly as they desired.